The dimly lit cantina on mining platform GR-902 was precisely the type of establishment that HFY detested. However, following 3 weeks of relentless orbital skirmishes, even this dive appeared as paradise. His ravaged exosuit, etched with marks from countless engagements, groaned as he stooped beneath the low doorway. The native Xenos, slender, ethereal beings with opalescent skin, scattered like startled glowbirds at his arrival. The cantina's interior mirrored its patrons. Fragile-looking crystal-weave furniture, delicate lumicast fixtures, and an aura of refined frailty that made Jax feel like a gorilla in a glasshouse. But something was amiss. The customary apprehensive murmurs that trailed his entry were tinged with an additional edge of disquiet. The locals weren't merely afraid of him, they were petrified of something else. That something turned out to be someone, a female figure seated at the bar, her heliotrope skin gleaming beneath the dim lights. Her armor, though distinct in design from his, bore similar combat scars. Long iridescent heliotrope braids cascaded down her back, and when she turned to face him, her eyes literally scintillated with an inner corona. "Well," Jax muttered, recognizing another apex predator on sight. Their gazes locked, and the ambient temperature in the room appeared to surge several degrees. The local barkeep, a spindly entity with too many manipulators, quietly scuttled away from the bar. The heliotrope warrior arose from her seat with fluid grace. She moved like someone acclimated to higher gravities, her musculature rippling beneath her armor weave. A predatory grin played across her face as she deliberately stepped into Jax's path. "You're obstructing my passage," he stated, mirroring her grin with one of his own. "Am I?" Her voice carried the same perilous playfulness as a gyrinx toying with its prey. "I've never encountered another being who could approximate my fortitude. The natives here shatter so readily." "I've endured a protracted rotation," Jax drawled, his hand casually resting on his utility belt. "How about we forego the preliminaries and proceed directly to what we both anticipate is imminent?" She laughed, a sound akin to steel echo striking steel echo. "Finally, someone who understands my dialect." Without warning, she unleashed a punch that would have pulverized a conventional being's mandible. Jax intercepted her fist with his gauntlet, the impact transmitting shockwaves through the cantina. Several of the crystal-weave chairs shattered. "A fine jab," he grinned, "but your technique requires improvement." The altercation erupted like a nova burst. The local patrons fled, shrieking, as the two warriors collided, trading blows that could splinter steel echo. Jax ducked beneath a spinning kick that left a fissure in a support beam, retaliating with a leg sweep that she leaped over with inhuman agility. "Mad voidstalkers," someone shrieked from behind an overturned table. "This is why their homeworlds are ruins." Another Xeno wailed, but neither combatant paid attention to the commentary. They were too engrossed in evaluating each other, every strike and counterstrike a discourse of fortitude and skill. Jax hadn't felt this alive in solar cycles. His adversary moved like liquid quicksilver, potent and precise. Yet he matched her blow for blow. The altercation concluded as abruptly as it commenced, when they simultaneously landed hits that sent them both staggering backward. They stood there, ventilating heavily, scrutinizing each other with newfound respect. Then the heliotrope warrior commenced laughing, and Jax couldn't resist joining in. "Not inadequate for a Terran," she said, wiping a trace of quicksilver blood from her lip. "You're not so dilapidated yourself," he retorted, rotating his shoulder where her previous impact had connected. "Shall I offer to purchase you a stimulant?" "Only if it's something potent enough to extinguish lesser species," she extended her hand. "I am Seraphina Kryll, formerly of Pyra Prime." "Jax Vor Terra," he clasped her hand, sensing the fortitude in her grip. "And I possess precisely the concoction. Ever sampled Taran Energex?" They claimed a corner table, disregarding the nervous glances from the few patrons intrepid enough to remain, and Jax extracted a flask of amber liquid that made Seraphina's eyes widen appreciatively. "Single batch, aged 15 cycles. Potent enough to strip plasteel." "Impeccable," Seraphina sampled the Energex and grinned. "Almost as potent as Pyran Firewine. You know, I consistently believed I was unique in these locales, the sole survivor of a death world. Hate to shatter your illusions, but Terra renders your Pyra Prime akin to a resort colony." Jax leaned back, his exosuit creaking. "We Terrans have a saying, what doesn't extinguish you renders you more resilient. Our entire planet attempted to extinguish us, and observe how that culminated." Is that an invitation, Terran?
Serafinas Eis glimmt brichter.
Just enunciating facts. Though if you desire another round, he gestured to the space they'd cleared during their altercation. She laughed again, the sound somehow both ominous and melodious. Perhaps subsequently. Presently, I'm more intrigued in ascertaining how Terrans endure their infernal homeworld.
Exchange Chronicles. Kronziele for Chronicle.
Jax proposed, replenishing their glasses.
Transaktion.
As they exchanged epics of survival and combat, the local Xenos murmured amongst themselves, utterly perplexed by how these two savage Deathworlders could transition from attempting to extinguish each other to amicable conversation in the span of rotations. These maniacs are utterly deranged, muttered one crystalweave being to another. Unequivocally insane, assented its companion. But at least they're not demolishing anything anymore. The rotation waned, and with each chronicle and stimulant, the space between Jax and Serafina diminished. Their laughter became more frequent, their glances more sustained, two apex predators recognizing something in each other that they'd never located anywhere else in the galaxy. The night cycle on mining platform GR902 brought a different ambience to the dimly lit cantina. Most of the fragile locals had retreated, leaving Jax and Serafina relatively isolated with their chronicles and energex. The dim lumicast cast heliotrope shadows across Serafina's features, rendering her skin shimmer like twilight on an alien ocean. So there I was, Jax continued his chronicle, his voice carrying the warmth of the energex, encircled by 3 crawl berserkers, armed with nothing but a fractured plasma rifle and my progenitor's lucky combat blade. Serafina leaned forward, her scintillating eyes intense. The same blade you're carrying now? She nodded toward the weathered sheath at his hip. The very same, he drew the blade, its ancient steel echo catching the light.
Family heirloom.
Been passed down through 5 generations of Vor warriors. May I? She asked, extending her hand. Jax hesitated only briefly before placing the blade in her palm. Her fingers brushed against his, transmitting an electric current through both of them. Remarkable balance, she noted, testing the weight.
Your species still employs Physikalblades?
Most deem them primitive.
Jax grint. Sometimes primitive is precisely what you necessitate. Besides, noting surpasses satisfaction of a kill up close and personal.
They finished in unison, their eyes meeting with newfound understanding. The moment was interrupted by the thunderous arrival of local security forces, a dozen crystalweave beings in ill-fitting armor, their weaponry trained on the 2 Deathworlders. By the authority of Mining Commission Regulation 47B, announced their leader, his voice quavering, you are both under arrest for destruction of property and disturbing the peace. Jax and Serafina exchanged a look that was part amusement, part anticipation. Before either could respond, Serafina's communicator chirped. Her expression darkened as she read the message. Speaking of primitive, she muttered, remember that artifact I mentioned? My sources just confirmed it's here on this very platform, and the current possessor is. She nodded toward the security leader. Jax's grin widened. Well, isn't that convenient? The security chief must have noticed their exchange, because he took a nervous step backward. In addition to property damage, you are now charged with conspiring. A distant explosion cut him off, shaking the entire structure. Emergency sirens commenced wailing throughout the platform. Hull breach in Sector 7. Someone screamed from outside. Multiple hostile entities detected. The security forces wavered, torn between their current arrest and the new threat. Another explosion made the decision for them, sending them scrambling toward the real danger. Looks like your artifact brought friends, Jax observed, finishing his energex in one gulp. Care to enlighten me on what we're actually confronting? Serafina stood, her armor adjusting to her movements with fluid grace. The Shard of Pyra, a crystalline key that can activate ancient armaments from my homeworld. In the wrong hands, it could transform this entire sector into a war zone. Jax finished his thought. He rose as well, their bodies naturally gravitating closer.
Good thing you got backup now.
Is that what you are? Backup. Her voice carried a teasing challenge that made his blood run hotter than the energex. I'm partner, he corrected, stepping closer until they were nearly touching. The air between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with combat. At least for this mission. Just this mission? Her hand found its way to his chest plate, fingers tracing an old combat scar. That seems wasteful. Two apex predators like us. We could be unstoppable together. Jax caught her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. Careful, warrior. You're commencing to sound like you're proposing something more than a temporary alliance. And if I am? Her free hand slid up to his neck, claws gently scraping his skin. Your species does mate for life, doesn't it? Among other things, he murmured, their faces inches apart. We're also known for our stamina, fortitude. And another explosion rocked the platform, this one closer. They reluctantly separated, both grinning like predators before a hunt. Tell you what, Seraphina said, checking her weaponry. Help me retrieve the shard, and I'll let you demonstrate all those famous Terran qualities in detail. Transaction, Jax replied, his voice rough with promise. But first, let's illustrate to these hostiles what transpires when they interrupt two Deathworlders' drinking time. They moved toward the door in perfect synchronization, their bodies already attuned to each other's movements. The local Xenos who witnessed their exit would later swear they'd never seen anything more terrifying or magnificent than the two apex predators moving as one, prepared to confront whatever chaos awaited them. As they reached the corridor, Seraphina suddenly pulled Jax into an alcove, pressing him against the wall with inhuman fortitude. One more thing, she whispered, before claiming his mouth in a kiss that felt like a nova-burst explosion. When she pulled back, her eyes were scintillating brighter than ever. That's a promise of what's to come. Damn, Jax breathed, his heart racing. Now I'm really motivated to end this expeditiously. They emerged from the alcove to discover the corridor in chaos, with panicked Xenos running in all directions. Through the transparent dome above, they could observe multiple hostile ships attaching themselves to the platform. Let's hunt, partner? Seraphina asked, her weaponry humming to life. Jax unsheathed his progenitor's blade, spinning it once before settling into a combat stance. Born prepared. Let's show them what transpires when you anger two Deathworlders in love. The environmental systems of mining platform GR902 screamed in protest as the shard's energy signature began interfering with the station's delicate equilibrium. Emergency luminaires painted the corridors in blood-red hues as Jax and Seraphina fought their way through waves of rival claimants. Your artifact's getting feisty, Jax shouted over the pandemonium, his back pressed against Seraphina's as they faced opponents from both directions. The ambient temperature in the corridor had surged to levels that would have cooked most species alive. The shard responds to conflict, Seraphina explained, her heliotrope skin glistening with exertion. It feeds on the energy of battle, amplifying the environmental conditions to match my homeworlds. A group of mercenaries rounded the corner, burly crawl axemen with reinforced exosuits. Their leader sneered at the sight of the two Deathworlders. Surrender the shard's location, and we might permit you to exist. Jax chuckled darkly. Did you hear that, partner? They might permit us to exist. How considerate. Seraphina purred, her combat stance shifting subtly. Should we illustrate to them why that's the incorrect approach? The crawl axemen charged, their heavy boots thundering against the metal floor. What ensued was a symphony of violence that would have rendered lesser beings catatonic. Jax and Seraphina moved like twin storms, their combat styles complementing each other perfectly. Where he was raw power and precision, she was fluid grace and deadly accuracy. The station's gravity began fluctuating wildly, sending loose equipment floating upward before crashing down again. Most of the station's regular inhabitants had evacuated to the emergency shelters, leaving the corridors to the warriors who could endure these extreme conditions. This is akin to the acid storms back home, Seraphina called out, dispatching another mercenary with elegant efficiency, though the company is significantly better. Better flirting during combat? Jax grinned, utilizing the variable gravity to launch himself at a ceiling-mounted attacker. I'm commencing to believe you're perfect. Their banter was interrupted by a massive surge in the environmental systems. The temperature plummeted suddenly, frost crystallizing on their armor. The remaining crawl axemen fell back, their suits unable to compensate for the rapid change. The shard. Seraphina gasped, her breath visible in the freezing air. It's testing us. Only those resilient enough to endure extreme conditions can claim it. Jax moved closer to her, their bodies naturally seeking each other's warmth. Good thing you located yourself a Terran partner then. We're essentially roaches, impossible to extinguish and adaptable as hell. Romantic, she teased, but her eyes blazed with appreciation. The security center is 2 sectors ahead. That's where they're keeping the shard. They pressed forward through the increasingly hostile environment. The station's corridors had become a labyrinth of deadly challenges, sections of extreme heat followed by killing cold, areas of crushing gravity alternating with zero-G zones. For the 2 Deathworlders, it was exhilarating. You know, Jack said as they navigated a particularly treacherous section. On Terra, this would be deemed a rather unique first date. Seraphina's laughter echoed through the corridor. On Pyra Prime, this would be deemed foreplay. Their eyes met, and the temperature between them rose independently of the environmental systems. The attraction that had been simmering since their Cantino altercation was reaching a boiling point, fueled by the adrenaline of combat and the thrill of locating an equal partner. When this is over, Jack started, his voice rough with promise. When this is over, Seraphina cut in, pulling him close, I'm going to illustrate to you precisely how a Pyran warrior claims her mate. The moment was shattered by an explosion that rocked the entire sector. Through the breach in the station's hull, they could observe more ships approaching, heavily armed vessels bearing the marks of various mercenary groups and artifact hunters. Looks like we've got company, Jax observed, checking his weaponry. The entire damned galaxy wants your shard. Let them come, Seraphina replied, her eyes scintillating fiercer than ever. They'll learn what transpires when they challenge 2 Deathworlders who've located each other. They reached the security center to find it transformed by the shard's influence. The room had become a swirling vortex of environmental extremes, patches of space where the air itself burned, zones where metal froze and shattered, areas where gravity crushed everything to the floor. In the center, suspended in a containment field, floated a crystalline object about the size of a human fist. Its surface rippled with energy patterns that reminded Jax of solar flares on Terra's sun. Beautiful, isn't it? Seraphina breathed, her eyes fixed on the artifact. The last remnant of my world's golden age. With it, we could restore Pyra Prime to its former glory, or someone could use it to turn every world into a death world, Jax added, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's why you've been protecting it. The galaxy isn't prepared for such power, she confirmed. Most species can barely survive their comfortable, climate-controlled environments. But you. She turned to him, her expression intense. You understand what it means to be forged by adversity, to be strengthened by challenge. Takes one to know one, he replied, reaching for her hand. The contact sent sparks of electricity through both of them, their enhanced physiologies resonating with each other and the shard's energy. The security center's doors burst open, revealing the first wave of their pursuers. Behind them, alarms warned of hull breaches in multiple sectors as more hostile forces invaded the station. Ready to illustrate these softworlders what real warriors can do? Jax asked, drawing his weaponry. Seraphina's answering grin was fierce and beautiful. With you, always. The shard pulsed with increasing intensity, its crystalline structure sending out waves of raw energy that merged with the station systems. The security center's walls began to transform, sprouting crystalline growths that resembled the deadly flora of Pyra Prime. It's not just affecting the environment anymore, Seraphina observed, her hands still intertwined with Jax's. It's reshaping the station itself. Jax watched as the metal floor beneath them started to ripple like liquid quicksilver. How long before this whole place becomes a pocket death world? Cycles, perhaps less. Seraphina's eyes gleamed brighter as she focused on the shard. The artifact responds to strong emotions and survival instincts. Our presence, 2 Deathworlders in combat, it's accelerating the process. The room shuddered as another wave of attackers tried to breach the security center's doors. The crystalline growths responded, forming razor-sharp barriers across the entrances. Well, that's handy, Jax grinned, pulling Seraphina closer as a patch of corrosive atmosphere passed near them. Your artifact's got style. The shard doesn't just respond to combat, Seraphina said, her voice dropping to a sultry purr. It resonates with all primal forces, including attraction between compatible beings. As if responding to her words, the crystal formations around them began to pulse with a warm, reddish light. The environmental hazards in their immediate vicinity calmed, creating a pocket of stability in the chaos. Compatible beings, Jax turned to face her fully, his free hand tracing the curve of her jaw. Is that what we are? More than compatible, she breathed, leaning into his touch. When I came hunting for the shard, I never expected to locate something even rarer, another apex predator who could match me in every way. The station's transformation accelerated around them, but neither warrior paid it much attention. The shard's energy had created a cocoon of deadly conditions that kept their enemies at bay while leaving them in the eye of the storm. You know, Jack said, his voice rough with desire, on Terra we have an old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Seraphina's laugh was rich and deep. On Pyra Prime, we say those who survive together, thrive together. Her claws traced patterns on his armor. And we've done more than just survive. Their moment was interrupted by a massive explosion that rocked the entire sector. Warning klaxons blared as the station's AI announced, critical system failure. Station-wide environmental controls compromised. Transformation cascade initiating. Damn, Jax muttered, reluctantly focusing on the crisis at hand. How do we prevent this place from becoming a miniature version of your homeworld? Seraphina's eyes widened with sudden understanding. We don't prevent it, we control it. The shard responds to us, to our combined strength. She pressed closer to him, their armor clicking together. Two Deathworlders, perfectly matched, working in harmony, could stabilize the transformation, Jax finished, catching on. But how do we? His question was cut off by Seraphina's kiss, fierce and passionate. The shard's light pulsed in sync with their heartbeats as they came together, their natural chemistry amplified by the artifact's power. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, the station's transformation had slowed to a manageable pace. The security center had become a fortress of crystalline structures that responded to their will, creating safe passages while maintaining lethal conditions for any would-be intruders. That's one way to do it, Jack said with a roguish grin, though I think we might need to strengthen the connection. Agreed, Seraphina purred, her eyes promising much more once their mission was complete. But first, we need to establish control over the entire station. The shard's power must be contained and directed. They moved through the transformed station like apex predators in their natural habitat. The hostile environments that extinguished their pursuers only rendered them more resilient, their bodies adapting and thriving in conditions that would have been lethal to lesser beings. The station's transformation had created a labyrinth of deadly challenges, corridors of extreme pressure, chambers of impossible cold, zones where reality itself seemed warped. But for Jax and Seraphina, it felt like coming home. You know what's humorous? Jax said as they navigated a particularly treacherous section. I spent solar cycles believing Terra was the most arduous environment in the galaxy. Then I encountered you, and I believed I was alone in understanding what it meant to be forged by adversity, Seraphina replied, her hand finding his again. We were both incorrect in the most optimal way. They reached a central control node where the shard's influence was strongest. The crystalline growths had formed a natural altar, awaiting their touch to complete the transformation. Together? Jax asked, positioning himself on one side of the altar. Together, Seraphina confirmed, taking her place opposite him. Prepared to create our own little piece of paradise? Paradise. Jax laughed. Most species would deem this hell. Most species are weak, she replied with a predatory grin. But us? We're just getting initiated. They placed their hands on the altar in perfect synchronization, and the shard's energy surged through them. The station shuddered one final time as the transformation stabilized, creating a controlled Deathworld environment that would serve as both their fortress and their home. The transformed mining station hummed with crystalline energy, its core now a perfect blend of Terra's and Pyra Prime's most challenging environments. Jax and Seraphina stood before a newly formed chamber where the shard's power had created a holographic display of ancient star charts. These markings. Seraphina murmured, her heliotrope fingers tracing the ethereal lines. They're identical to the sacred ruins on my homeworld. Jax stepped closer, his body naturally aligning with hers. And these coordinates? They match locations of Terra's most extreme environments, the Mariana Trench, Death Valley, Mount Everest. The shard pulsed rhythmically, responding to their combined presence, its crystalline surface rippling, projecting new images, ancient spacecraft with designs unlike anything in known space. The architects, Seraphina breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. The legend spoke of beings who shaped worlds, but I never thought that they deliberately created Deathworlds. Jax finished his thought, his hand finding the small of her back. Looks like they were running some kind of galaxy-wide experiment in evolutionary acceleration. The holographic display shifted, showing twin sequences of genetic code, one Terran, one Pyran. The similarities were stunning. "We were meant to locate each other," Serafina said softly, turning to face him. "Our species were designed to be compatible, to eventually encounter and combine our strengths," Jack suggested, pulling her closer. The shard's energy surged around them, creating a cocoon of swirling power that responded to their mounting desires. "More than that," she purred, her claws tracing patterns on his chest plate. "The architects desired to create perfect warriors, beings who could endure anything, but they couldn't achieve it with just one species." The station's transformed environment seemed to pulse in sync with their heartbeats as Jax leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "So they made two, separated by light years, evolving on different Deathworlds until we were prepared to locate each other," Serafina finished, her scintillating eyes meeting his with an intensity that made the air crackle. "To create something even stronger." The shard's projection showed more vast networks of ancient facilities scattered across both their worlds, all designed to push their ancestors to evolve, to become stronger, faster, more resilient. "Your people's warrior traditions," Jax observed, studying the data. "Our endless drive to explore and conquer. It wasn't just natural evolution. We were guided." Serafina agreed, her body pressing against his as they watched their shared history unfold. But the architects couldn't predict everything. They didn't expect this. Jax turned her fully into his arms, the movement fluid and natural. "I'm rather certain ancient aliens didn't plan on me falling for the most beautiful warrior in the galaxy." Serafina's laugh was rich and deep. "Or me locating a Terran male who could match me in every way." Her fingers traced his jaw. "Though I'm certain they'd approve of the results." The shard's energy swirled around them more intensely, responding to their attraction. The chamber's crystalline walls began to pulse with a warm, inviting light. "You know," Jax said, his voice rough with desire, "on Terra, we have some intriguing traditions about what to do when you discover you're part of an ancient destiny." "Oh." Serafina's eyes sparkled with mischief. "And what might those be?" "Well, firstly." He pulled her into a kiss that made the shard's energy spike dramatically. The station's environmental controls fluctuated wildly before stabilizing into a perfect blend of their homeworld's conditions. When they finally parted, both ventilating heavily, Serafina's heliotrope skin was flushed darker. "That's a fine tradition," she murmured. "We had similar ones on Pyra Prime, though ours usually involved less clothing and more." The chamber responded to their thoughts, the crystalline growths forming into something that resembled a private sanctuary. The shard's light dimmed to a subtle glow, creating an intimate atmosphere. "The architects may have designed us," Jax said, his hands exploring the clasps of her armor, "but this is all us." "Proving once again," Serafina replied, her own fingers making quick work of his exosuit, "that Deathworlders do everything better." The station systems registered a significant spike in environmental energy as the two warriors finally came together as equals, their passion amplified by the shard's ancient power. The transformed outpost became a testament to their union, a perfect fusion of Terra's raw strength and Pyra Prime's deadly grace. Solar cycles later, they lay entwined in their crystalline sanctuary, the shard's gentle pulses matching their synchronized heartbeats. The holographic displays continued to reveal more secrets about their shared heritage, but neither warrior was paying much attention. "So," Jax said, tracing patterns on Serafina's heliotrope skin, "think we lived up to the architect's grand plan?" She laughed, the sound echoing through their private paradise. "I believe we exceeded it. They desired perfect warriors. Instead, they got something much more intriguing, a Terran male and a Pyran female proving that love can bloom even in the harshest conditions." "Precisely." Serafina propped herself up on one elbow, her scintillating eyes full of affection and fierce pride. "Though I'm still not convinced you're entirely Terran. No normal Terran could keep up with a Pyran warrior like that." Jax grinned, pulling her back down. "Guess you'll just have to keep testing that theory." The shard pulsed approvingly, its ancient power celebrating the union it had waited millennia to witness. The crystalline chamber's serenity shattered as new signals pierced through the transformed station systems. Jax jolted awake, his warrior instincts instantly alert. Beside him, Serafina was already moving, her heliotrope skin gleaming in the shard's pulsing light. Multiple incoming transmissions, she announced, interfacing with the station's enhanced sensors. And not just standard communications. These are architect frequencies. Jax pulled on his armor, watching as holographic displays materialized around them. More shards. Serafina's eyes blazed with excitement. Better, full facilities. The architects left entire complexes on both our worlds. And she paused, studying the data. We're not the only ones who've detected them. The displays showed multiple fleet movements converging on Terra and Pyra Prime, various species from the methodical Quantarium to the aggressive Marxian, all racing to claim the ancient technology. They don't comprehend what they're confronting, Jax growled, stepping behind Serafina and wrapping his arms around her waist. Those facilities were designed for Deathworlders, she agreed, leaning back against his chest. The environmental defenses alone would extinguish most species. But for us? It's home. He nuzzled her neck, inhaling her unique scent that reminded him of thunderstorms in battle. Speaking of which, prepared to illustrate the galaxy why they shouldn't mess with mated Deathworlders. The term mate sent a visible shiver through Serafina's body. On Pyra Prime, such bonds were deemed stronger than any political alliance or military oath. Always prepared, my warrior. Though we should probably suit up properly this time. Their new armor, transformed by the shard's power, was a perfect fusion of their original gear, crystalline reinforcements merged with traditional plating, creating protection that could withstand even the most extreme conditions. The nearest facility is on Terra, Jax said, studying the coordinates. Death Valley. Because of course it is. Serafina's laugh was rich with anticipation. The architects did possess a sense of humor. The Pyran facility is in our eternal storm region. Race you there. Jax suggested with a roguish grin. Last one to secure their world's facility owes the other a proper Deathworlder. His night of passion was implied. Transaction. Serafina spun in his arms, pulling him into a kiss that made the station's environmental controls fluctuate wildly. Though I believe we both triumph either way. They separated reluctantly, each heading to their respective ships that had been enhanced by the station's transformation. The vessels now sported crystalline growths that hummed with the shard's energy, rendering them capable of enduring conditions that would tear normal ships apart. Stay connected through the shard network, Serafina commanded as they prepared to launch. I desire to hear every detail of how you handle those softworlders attempting to claim your facility. Same here, Jax replied, his voice rough with both desire and anticipation. Illustrate them why Pyrans are feared across the galaxy. Their ships launched simultaneously, streaking away in opposite directions. The transformed station remained as their anchor point, maintaining the unique frequency that kept them connected across the vast distances of space. And through this link, they shared everything. Jax sensed Serafina's fierce joy as she broke through a Quantarium blockade, her ship's crystalline weaponry cutting through their supposedly impenetrable shields. In return, she experienced his savage satisfaction as he outmaneuvered a Marxian battle fleet, leading them into Death Valley's enhanced defense systems. Facilities activating, Jax reported, his excitement palpable through their connection. You should witness this, love. The entire valley is transformed, forming just like the station. Same here, Serafina purred, her mental touch sending shivers down his spine. The eternal storm is evolving. The architects left us more than armaments, they left us the keys to restore our worlds. Their synchronized assaults on the facilities triggered something neither expected. The shard's energy, amplified by the ancient complexes, began spreading across both planets. Harsh environments became harsher, but in a controlled way, creating zones that only Deathworlders could endure. The Softworlders are retreating, Serafina reported with satisfaction. Apparently, watching a planet actively attempt to extinguish them is bad for morale. Cannot imagine why, Jax chuckled, his ship dancing through Death Valley's new crystalline defenses. Though we should probably warn them about what transpires if they attempt it again. Already done, there was a predatory satisfaction in Serafina's voice. I may have demonstrated what transpires when you challenge a mated Pyran warrior. The Quantarium Admiral actually fainted.
That's my good.
Jax's pride and affection flowed through their link. Prepared to head home? I believe we both triumphed in this race. Home, Serafina agreed softly, though we should probably christen both facilities. Firstly, for security purposes, of course. Of course. Jax's grin was audible. Can't leave any part of our territory unclaimed. Their ships turned back toward the station, now a beacon of power in space. Behind them, Terra and Pyra Prime pulsed with renewed energy, their harshest regions transformed into impenetrable fortresses that would serve as warnings to the galaxy. These worlds belong to the Deathworlders. The transformed mining station's sensors lit up like a nova burst as ships began appearing at the edge of the system. Unlike the hostile forces they had faced previously, these vessels moved with the confident precision of predators. More Deathworlders, Serafina breathed, watching the displays from their crystalline command center, her body pressed against Jax's as they studied the approaching fleet. The Architect's activation signal must have drawn them out of hiding. The lead ship transmitted an identification code that made both warriors straighten with interest. It was written in an ancient script that predated known galactic civilization. Well, Jax chuckled, his hands resting on Serafina's hips, looks like we're not the only ones the Architects prepared for something significant. The incoming vessels represented species from worlds that had always been dismissed as too hostile for intelligent life. The magma swimmers of Thermos 6, the storm riders of the gas giant Tempestus, the crystal shapers of the diamond world Prura, all of them evolved in conditions that would extinguish most species instantly. Shall we welcome them properly? Serafina asked, turning in Jax's embrace with a predatory grin. Illustrate them what transpires when Terran and Pyran combine their strengths. Absolutely. He kissed her deeply, their passion rendering the station's crystal formations pulse with energy. Though, perhaps we should don armor first. Not all Deathworlders appreciate public displays of affection. They suited up in their transformed armor, now a perfect blend of both their world's defensive technologies. As they made their way to the docking bay, the station systems revealed more data from the Architect's archives.
Bei the Stars. Serafina muttert, reading the information.
The threat they were preparing for. It's not coming, it's returning. The holographic display showed images of ancient battles, entire galaxies being consumed by entities that existed in dimensions beyond normal space. The Architects had seeded death worlds throughout the galaxy, creating species that could endure in impossible conditions, all in preparation for the entity's prophesied return. How long? Jax asked, his tactical mind already analyzing potential strategies. Cycles, perhaps less. Serafina's hand found his. The Architect's calculations were precise. They knew exactly when their creations would necessitate to be prepared. The docking bay doors opened to reveal their visitors, a collection of beings that would have sent Softworlders running in terror. But to Jax and Serafina, they were simply equals, fellow survivors of worlds that attempted to extinguish them daily. The magma swimmers moved like living quicksilver, their bodies adapting to the station's artificial gravity. The storm riders crackled with contained lightning, their energy forms barely contained in crystalline suits. The crystal shapers looked almost like walking diamonds, their bodies evolved to endure pressures that could crush stars. Welcome to Outpost Phoenix, Jax announced, utilizing the name they'd given their transformed station. I'm Jax Vor of Terra, and this is my mate, Serafina Kryll of Pyra Prime. We have observed your union with great interest, one of the storm riders replied, their voice like distant thunder. The Architects spoke of such a pairing in their prophecies. The joining of two perfect warrior races, the first of many such unions we hope, a magma swimmer added, their form rippling with internal heat. Our species have hidden long enough. The time has come to unite. The crystal shapers moved forward, their crystalline bodies resonating with the station's transformed structure. We bring warnings as well as allegiance. The void hunters stir in the spaces between galaxies. Already, their scout forms test the barriers between dimensions. Serafina's grip on Jax's hand tightened. Then we'll give them a proper Deathworlder welcome when they arrive. Illustrate them why the Architects chose us. The gathering of apex predator species quickly turned into a war council unlike any the galaxy had seen. Each race brought unique abilities and technologies that complemented the others perfectly. The Architects' plan became clear. They hadn't just created survivors, they'd created an army. During a break in the strategic planning, Jax and Serafina found themselves in their private chambers, the weight of their new responsibility heavy but exhilarating. You know, Jax said, helping Serafina remove her armor, on Terra, We had legends about times like these when heroes from different worlds would unite against a common enemy. On Pyra Prime, she replied, her claws tracing patterns on his chest. We had similar tales, though ours usually concluded with the warriors celebrating their victories in more intimate ways. I like your people's chronicles better, he growled, pulling her close. The station's crystals hummed in response to their mounting desires, creating an aurora of energy around them. Their passion that night was different, deeper, more primal. They weren't just two Deathworlders locating comfort in each other anymore. They were the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, the first of many unions that would forge a new future for the galaxy. As they lay together afterward, watching the stars through their chamber's crystal ceiling, Seraphina traced the battle markings on Jax's skin. We're going to change everything, aren't we? We already have, he replied, kissing her forehead. The Softworlders deemed us savages, too primitive to rule ourselves. Now they'll observe what real power looks like, Deathworlders united, fighting for something worth protecting. The station sensors continued to track more approaching ships, more hidden Deathworlder species answering the ancient call. Each arrival brought new strengths, new abilities, and new hope for the coming battle. The dimensional breach appeared exactly where the architect's prophecies predicted, a massive tear in reality that turned the space around Outpost Phoenix into a maelstrom of impossible energies. The Void Hunter's scout forms emerged like living shadows, their mere presence causing Softworlder ships to malfunction and their crews to fall into catatonic terror. But the Deathworlders were prepared. Jax and Seraphina stood at the command center of their transformed station, their bodies in perfect synchronization as they coordinated the Alliance's defense. The Crystal Shapers had modified the station structure to channel the Shard's power through the entire Deathworlder fleet, while the Storm Riders provided energy shields that could endure dimensional distortions. Remember when we first encountered each other? Jax asked, pulling Seraphina close as they watched the Void Hunters approach in that dingy cantina. Both of us believing we were alone in the galaxy. She purred, her heliotrope skin scintillating with battle readiness. Most optimal cantina altercation of my life, though I had no idea it would lead to saving the galaxy. The magma swimmer vessels moved into position, their living metal hulls adapting to create a defensive line. Behind them, ships from Terra and Pyra Prime demonstrated why their worlds had produced the galaxy's most feared warriors. All Deathworlder ships, this is command, Jax announced over the fleet-wide channel. Remember your training. These things might be ancient and powerful, but they've never faced species that evolved to thrive in hell. The Void Hunters struck firstly, their attack patterns defying normal physics. But the Deathworlders responded with the adaptability that had kept them alive on their hostile worlds. The magma swimmer ships literally flowed around dimensional attacks, while Storm Rider vessels transformed enemy energy into weaponry. They're testing our defenses, Seraphina observed, her tactical mind analyzing the patterns. But they're about to learn something significant about Deathworlders. What's that, love? We don't just survive. Her eyes blazed as she activated the station's primary weaponry. We conquer. The battle that followed would be remembered in galactic history as the moment everything shifted. The Void Hunters, accustomed to facing species that cowered before their power, located themselves against races that laughed in the face of impossible odds. Terran ships demonstrated their species' infamous ability to turn any situation to their advantage, while Pyran vessels moved with deadly grace through the chaos. The other Deathworlder species proved equally formidable, each contributing their unique evolutionary advantages to the fight. During a brief lull in the battle, Jax and Seraphina retreated to their private chambers for a moment of connection. Their passion was fierce and primal, enhanced by the thrill of combat and their shared destiny. The station's crystals pulsed with their combined energy, sending waves of power through the Alliance's defensive network. The architects knew what they were doing, Jax said afterward, tracing the battle markings on Seraphina's armor. Creating species that could not just fight the Void Hunters, but thrive in the conflict they created. Warriors, Seraphina agreed, her claws leaving loving marks on his skin, but we became something more. The Softworlders feared us, deemed us primitive, but gaze at us now, defending the very galaxy that rejected us. The final phase of the battle commenced with a discovery in the Architect's databases. The technology existed to transform normal worlds into death worlds, not as a weapon, but as protection against dimensional incursions. The choice is yours, the Crystal Shapers told the assembled Softworlders who had sought refuge behind the Deathworlder line. Remain as you are and depend on our protection, or evolve to face the darkness yourselves. To everyone's surprise, many chose evolution. The Deathworlder's display of power and unity had altered perceptions across the galaxy. Species that had once feared the harsh worlds now saw them as crucibles of strength. The Void Hunter's final assault came as a massive wave of dimensional energy meant to transform reality itself. But they located themselves facing not just the original Deathworlder alliance, but a galaxy commencing to embrace the power of evolution. Jax and Seraphina led the counterattack, their bond resonating through the shard network to coordinate the entire fleet. Their love, forged in battle and tempered by shared destiny, became a weapon more potent than any technology. For every world that attempted to extinguish us and rendered us more resilient, Jax shouted as they engaged the enemy. For every species that deemed us savages and now stands behind us, Seraphina added, her weaponry locating impossible targets. The Void Hunters, for the firstly time in their ancient existence, knew fear. They faced not primitive warriors, but apex predators who had turned evolution itself into an art form. The dimensional breach collapsed under the combined assault, sealing the enemy back into their realm. In the aftermath, Jax and Seraphina stood in their crystalline sanctuary, watching as their alliance transformed into something greater, a union of species dedicated to strength through adversity. So, Jax said, pulling his mate close, what does a Deathworlder power couple do after saving the galaxy? Seraphina's laugh was full of promise and passion. Well, love, I hear there are still many cantinas in the galaxy we haven't fought in yet. It's impeccable. He kissed her deeply, their bond rendering the station's crystals sing. Though this time, let's proceed directly to the falling in love part. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of the Deathworlders had commenced, led by a Terran male and his Pyran mate who proved that the most immense power originates not from surviving alone, but from locating strength in each other. The end.